Hello everybody, thank you for coming this evening. My name is Suw Charman-Anderson and I am going to be talking to you about Fieldwork, which is my upcoming eco-sitcom podcast. Exciting. So before we get into that, I want to just share a little bit of good news. And that good news is we have won the argument on climate change and on biodiversity loss. Next slide. Sorry. Power through these slides quite quickly. 80% of the UK population is either fairly concerned or very concerned about climate change. 93% of people believe that biodiversity loss is either a serious or very serious issue. So we've gotten past the stage where we need outreach projects, and we certainly don't need any more climate stunts, because people are convinced that climate change and biodiversity loss are problems. What we need to do is move on to sort of like the next stage, which is to start talking about solutions. And we need to find out more about which kind of interventions work and persuade more people to take action. Next slide. Unfortunately, the media kind of hasn't really moved on, so they are still in the waggy finger awareness raising phase. And unfortunately, coverage telling people that things are just awful doesn't help us to solve any of the problems ahead of us. So doom-laden and depressing stories just make people feel disempowered. It makes them feel that there's nothing that they can do, or that the problem is just too big to tackle in our lifetimes. And that's just really not true. We need to talk more about what is possible, how change can happen, and how we can get involved. So we do see some of that messaging on some TV and radio shows. So Sandy's Great British Woodland Restoration, Countryfile, and even The Archers have covered these kind of topics. But they are I think they appeal to quite a narrow demographic, and we need to really spread our net a lot wider. Because popular culture can have a huge impact on how people think, on their interests, and even their choices of career. So Shuri from Black Panther, Agent Scully from The X-Files, and Bones all had an impact on the number of girls and young women moving into science and technology careers. So the question is, can we do the same thing but for ecology? So Fieldwork is an eco-sitcom podcast that I and my colleagues are working on at the moment. And we hope that this will encourage people to engage with ecology and with environmental issues. It follows 4 ecologists from the University of Berkshire as they embark on a long-term study of the impact of rewilding on plants, insects, animals, and local people. By making it a sitcom, we hope to attract a wider variety of people, not just those who already know they're interested in the environment, but maybe people who come along for the laughs and learn a bit of ecology by mistake along the way. So Fieldwork is a joint project between the University of York and the University of Edinburgh, and their support has been absolutely invaluable. So they've been able to put me in touch with ecologists and other people in the environmental sciences around the world. So I've interviewed a wide variety of ecologists working on a lot of different species. And that means that I've been able to actually ensure that the sitcom script includes real science. So it's based on ecologists' real experiences in the field and real science around the 3 key species that I'm looking at. So the next slide. First species is woodland bats. Bats turn out to be fascinating and mysterious. I did not know. There is so much we don't know about bats. Obviously, there are challenges studying bats because they are most active at night when sensible people are in bed. But there's lots that we don't know. For example, our most common bats, we don't actually know where they hibernate. Where do they go in the winter? Who knows? They also are an interesting species because they are very sensitive to habitat loss. So we have lost a lot of the veteran trees in the UK, the older trees that have damage from losing a branch or being struck by lightning. And that damage creates nooks and crevices that bats can roost in. So when we lose the older trees, we lose bat habitats. Hawfinches are another amazing species. They're the UK's biggest finch, and they're about the size of a blackbird. And their numbers, they used to be seen as an orchard pest, but now their numbers have just plummeted. And again, no one really knows why. Like bats, they're quite hard to study. They're very elusive. They don't really sing very much, so you can't find them through listening quite so easily. And they spend a lot of time up in the canopy. So monitoring them is difficult, catching them and ringing them is difficult, and I have it on very good authority that you do not want to be bitten by a hawfinch, because that beak is really powerful. So the third species that I'm interested in is the wood ant. And these are not just an important prey species for animals and birds that eat insects, they're also ecosystem engineers. So they aerate the soil, they create more organic material, bring organic material into the soil, and they play an important role in distributing seeds. So while the wood ant may be small, it is indeed very mighty. And finally, I'm interested in rewilding, because it's not enough just to work on biodiversity. We also need a diversity of habitats. And we need to think about how we can increase the different types of habitat. Rewilding is one way to do this. It allows us to let grassland mature through scrubland into woodland. But we also need to pay attention to our water, so ponds, streams, wetlands, because these are quite literally the breeding grounds for insects. And we've seen such a loss of insect diversity and population. We really need our insects back. So I've spent the last 2 years working on this project, and I've now got to the point where I have the pilot script for the first sitcom episode written. It's currently out with a professional reader to get some feedback. And this spring, I will be developing the rest of the season, and I'll also be looking for support. So building a community and also getting some funding. So this is where you will come in. Slide, please. The QR code will take you to my newsletter. I would absolutely love it if you could come and subscribe. It is at fieldworkpodcast.substack.com. I'd love if you could share the link for the newsletter with your community, with people you know, because ultimately the podcast isn't just about making a sitcom. It's also about trying to build a community where we can have a renewed, a more hopeful and more constructive conversation about what it takes to combat climate change and biodiversity. Because actually I had a conversation today with an ecologist, and he was saying the one thing that he wishes people understood was that there is hope, that we are actually doing some really useful, positive things. And finally, I am looking for sponsors, individuals, companies, don't mind. We do need to raise money so that we can get the podcast pilot recorded and then go on from there to create the rest of the series. So that is Fieldwork. Thank you all very much for listening, and I'll be around later for questions.